Matthew Zachary doesn't need any help getting his voice heard, but we're giving him our platform anyways. As one of the most prominent cancer patient advocates in the country, Matthew has been at this for a long time, 30 years to be exact. He was diagnosed with brain cancer in college and survived, kicking off a lifelong career in healthcare advocacy. If you follow Matthew online, you know he's a prolific poster, particularly on LinkedIn. Additionally, he hosts the Out of Patients podcast and also has a new book out titled We the Patients. As you'd expect, he has plenty of thoughts on where healthcare organizations and their leadership teams can step up to help improve patient outcomes. We wanted to bottle all that up into a rousing episode of the MM+M Podcast. That's why this week, Matthew sits down for an in-person interview with reporter Bella Jakowski, where they talk about his continually relentless advocacy work, the access issues plaguing the nation's fragmented healthcare system, as well as his piano recital / book launch event at Merkin Hall in New York.
Cool, let's jump in. I want to talk about your book, of course, which has been out for a couple weeks now.
You mean my book named?
Your book named We the Patients, which we have right here today. I've read, really enjoy, and also got to attend your book launch, part piano recital.
You were on the 28th?
I was there on the 28th.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it was awesome.
Drinking full Kool-Aid.
Yeah, no, the crowd was loving it. You know, you did the music, you talked about the book, you had some really good readings. So I'm excited to talk about that. But first, let's talk a little bit about ASCO, which I understand you attended. We also had a reporter on the ground, Lesha, for the first time. How did that go? What are your takeaways?
So this is my 20th ASCO. I'm celebrating ringing a bell or anything. But when I started going, I was running nonprofits. So you're there with like a grinder monkey and a tin cup and you're begging for money and traipsing around the entire city. And it wasn't even any Ubers back then. Like you were in little city cabs. Yeah. So bringing like a historical perspective on how it's evolved.
Yeah.
You know, just infrastructurally, let alone operationally and whatever. And now that the exhibit hall is finished, everything is pretty much there. So number one, less walking, but more walking.
Yeah, I've heard. I mean, our reporter said that some of the booths were like a city block wide.
Yeah. So from the nonprofit perspective, I'm pleased to see that we exist now. In the eyes of our being relevant, we should be shown, we should be there. It shouldn't cost us $50,000 for a booth. And even though it's a little bit of a zoo pellet animal factory kind of thing when you walk in, at least we're the first thing you see when you walk in the exhibit hall. There are now 4 rectangles with like 20 groups. So I'm like 80 groups. There are some others with a little more money that are, you know, have thicker carpet on the back corner.
Yeah.
But first and foremost, it was just really wonderful. Every year I go to see more and more nonprofits and new nonprofits too. Yeah. And as a disciple of there used to be 4 of us and now there's a lot of us, I'm very pleased to see. That was my big takeaway, that more nonprofits, the patient advocate lounge was like double the size now. They're feeding us actual food now instead of like zoo pellets, which is 20 years ago. Oh, you want to eat? Sure. So all love and hate and constructive criticisms, I have notes for ASCO. It really does need to exist. Yeah. It's really important. Like, it was like this crazy applause. There's this new pancreatic cancer medication that really? It does what? Yeah. And I mean, I know so many people that are there and so many physicians and hospital systems. It's just really, for me, it's a homecoming, but I just look at it from a very different lens.
Yeah.
And going this year was really unique because of the book and because what I spent the last year and a half trying to figure out, which is like a little bit of a Debbie Downer. None of this matters if insurance says go fuck yourself. And that's kind of like my new platform. And that's what I'm standing for. And I can still be a little diffident and acerbic in that sense. But no one disagrees. No. So that's kind of like my TLDR.
Yeah. And can you talk a little bit about the patient advocacy sort of realm there? It sounds like it's expanded over the course of the years. There's better food now.
Yes, there is. And more rounds of it, too.
More rounds of it.
They replenish it.
What are the roles of patient advocates at ASCO?
It's still kind of the tin cup thing. They're running around having meetings and the priorities are shifted and, you know, having this strange, I take every box crow's nest view.
Yeah.
I'm aware that between the one big beautiful bill and the war and all the other nonsense, the budgets are having this ebb tide, reorgs abound more than all ever rebounding reorganizations, and roles are shifting and they really are struggling to figure out where budgets are coming from and how to allocate those budgets. So I feel like real empathy for the smaller groups that are just trying to get that 5,000, that 10,000. And one of my colleagues runs the breast cancer advocate work for Pfizer, and she's dealing with 111 or 112 nonprofit breast cancer groups. How do you divvy up an annual budget to 100 and some odd groups and try to be equitable in that space? So there are the larger groups, and it really kind of is a Goldilocks at this point now. And I'm glad the smaller groups are there. I have all the feels for their Sisyphusian hurdles climbing the hill to get to like phase 2 of their growth. I'm glad some of the establishment groups are still there from 20 years ago. And the bigger groups, I'm starting to really believe that they're seeing collaboration now that, even though, yes, it's pancreatic, but it's based on success in other body parts. So they're starting to see like, oh, maybe we can collaborate because it's the same thing and we're not going to fight over the pennies on the floor.
Yeah, I heard that there was a standing ovation for that readout.
There really was.
That's amazing. I imagine there are some tears in the room for that. Let's talk a little bit. So patient advocates at big events like ASCO, and, you know, I'm relatively new to this beat, like I talked to you about before the show. But there are, you know, pharma companies really try to hit the nail on the head when it comes to, and agencies that do campaigns for pharma companies try to hit the nail on the head when it comes to telling patient stories in an authentic way that will resonate with patients, right? In this current landscape, where do you think they do that well, and where do you think they're still coming up short?
I think they're coming up short 95% of the time, and that's been consistent since I was working for Omnicom doing ads for glucophage in the 1990s. And so I can wear the hat, I can walk the walk, and I can talk the talk because I was in that creative space. And I had already entered the cancer world back then, but I didn't think about, like, are we really telling people that there's happiness on a toilet, in a bathtub, on a hill with breast cancer? And that's been my hot take the whole time, is that I get it. Lawyers suck. All lawyers suck except DAs. They're the spirit and soul of the planet. But regulatory has become the death of empathy. And I know that people that work in these agencies, and I know them very long time, they put their heart and soul into some true passion. They make a genuine effort. I'm not kissing their ass. This is not kissing the ring. I've seen the creatives. I've seen the campaigns. I've seen them doing the focus groups, and then everything just gets destroyed by compliance. Not to mention the fact that you have to read all the fine print in every single ad, and they say side effects include death. Just by watching this ad, side effects include death. No one wants to hear that. No one wants to see that. We're the only fucking country on the planet, except New Zealand, that's allowed to do it. So my harsh criticism is, can you stop doing this and throw that money back into advocacy budgets, or prove to me that some schmuck with pancreatic cancer listens to NPR, here's an ad for blah, 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 ulamab, and says, I'm going to talk to my doctor. He gets the drug and he's cured. I want to see that journey. Prove that to me. And then I'll forgive you for spending $35 billion a year on ads. But thank you for trying.
But thank you for trying. And I'd love to ask you, you had said at a point of care summit or conference semi-recently that brands aren't competing with each other necessarily alone, but that they're competing with something more powerful, which is the patient's emotional state. Can you expand on that? So
the point of care marketing group, again, which represents sort of downstreaming thought leadership into these people that are trying to do the right thing, but compliance kills it, is that you are competing for emotion. And as a theater kid and as an entertainer, the secret to life as a theater kid and the art of theater is no one cares what you have to say ever. It's all about how your audience needs to feel to care about what you're going to tell them. So that's Shakespeare. You know, that's Moliere. That's Broadway. That's just the art of any communication. It's like Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends. Give them what they want on your terms. And what patients want is what I kind of proved with Stupid Cancer and the young adult movement and our phenomenal gaggle of many, many organizations, is people want to feel seen and permission to be angry. And not the happy commercials and not the sanitized flyers and not the well-intended but poorly received, badly worded campaigns. You know, not that there's trigger words or anything like that, but when, again, most of these things are like, we're going to show happy people. We're going to show dancing people. We're going to show you that, you take a mood elevating drug. We'll get out of oncology and there's butterflies all around you. Like, this is not what people want to feel. going back to my prove to me this works and stop spending the money. What my talk was about was just that there is a medium to figure that out. Mm-hmm. But what they're missing in their creative conversations is involving the intended viewer listener in those conversations. Mm-hmm. They're making a lot of creative assumptions that if we say this on behalf of the client, minus the fine print and all the lawyer crap, that it'll be well received. Mm-hmm. They don't really do a lot of focus groups sometimes. And, if you bring PanCan, right, into the pancreatic cancer universe in the agency and you pay them to be there, I will quantify, you will pay them a lot of money to be there as your consultants for creative content marketing. Then you might produce something that has a little bit of empathy that flies not through the radar, but between the radar of compliance, realizing, it's okay to say it this way as long as we know it's going to be a little more effective. And then you could measure, what? We brought the people in that need the ad before we ran the ad. And who knew it worked?
Yeah. No, I mean, it does make a lot of sense, doesn't it?
One would think.
One would think. Have you seen some of the recent campaigns by the likes of like AstraZeneca, for example? There are a lot of like prostate cancer awareness campaigns specifically, and they're not promoting any specific drug, but, they're partnering with like big people in the NHL, or there's another one that does, it was like the Super Bowl unclench. It was...
that got a lot of hate.
Did it?
That Super Bowl ad?
Really?
Yeah. No, because they spent like $5 million on it. No one gave a shit. Was that Exact Science or Abbott or Bayer? I forget who did that ad. Doesn't matter. Like, there was talk of that.
Yeah.
That was actually part of the murmuring.
Yeah.
Like, can you believe they wasted all that money on that
that's
stupid
what I was going to
ad?
ask you about.
It's nonsense. And I look at, again, like, I all love to Exact Science and other people there. Cologuard's a miracle product. Mm-hmm. But they wasted how much money on, what's his face, Ryan Reynolds?
No, it was Novartis. Yeah.
I mean, yes, Novartis, big mistake. Big mistake. You let the lawyers do your work. It's not going to help. Yeah. Ryan Reynolds, Hugh Jackman, they've all tried to do like these, God, who's doing it now? There's some like really famous actor doing the Cologuard ads now. They're not working.
Oh, it's the guy from Full House.
John Stamos.
Yes, John Stamos.
Is it working? I want to know if it's working. Because they're probably paying him a lot of money, right?
Probably.
I'll give you this. Some of those compelling ads that I've seen that aren't PSAs for, woe is me people. So one of my dear friends is Courtney Bugler. She was an original volunteer for Stupid Cancer like 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. She's running Zero Prostate.
Okay.
When they get money, she runs it like an agency. So it's kind of a loophole to donate to a nonprofit and hope they do it the right way. But when you have a nonprofit that understands media marketing, they can put the campaigns together in a way that flies above the radar with unrestricted grants. Right. Then you get the empathy. Yeah. Then you get the anger. And then you get the impact. Yeah. So again, bringing in the nonprofits that have the expertise, not wasting it on those that can't accomplish it for you. There are ways to do this. And that was kind of rounding out. That's what I said at PSCMI.
And for that messaging to come to resonate with audiences more than maybe a traditional campaign.
Just one more note. In 2006, this when I started Stupid Cancer, everything was pink ribbons, pink blenders, pink airplanes, pink footballs, and yellow wristbands. Yeah. And then there was like the American Cancer Society doing whatever they do. Mm-hmm. And what young adults needed to hear was, this fucking sucks. I'm really fucking angry. So what I built with Stupid Cancer as an agency guy was like this, what we used to call it, what's it called? The anti-expectation. It was ultra jargon in the 90s for what you didn't expect the brand to give you. Like, a good example was like when toilet paper became bathroom tissue. Like, what the hell is this, right? Let's think about it. How did that happen? Yeah. So the marketing for Stupid Cancer was, we're sorry you're here. We're pissed too. Let's figure it out together. Right? And that just... And there was no threat of fundraising. There was no threat of marathons. There was no threat of wearing a T-shirt, although we had a lot of T-shirts.
Sure.
Yeah. So just rounding out, in sum, empathy marketing should be driven by the people at the end of the ad.
Yeah. I think that's a really good takeaway. Let's switch gears to talking more directly about your book. You've been an advocate in so many ways, including for yourself, in the care that you receive.
Yeah, let's not forget that whole 30-year thing. Yeah,
let's talk a little bit about, can you talk, because I heard this story when I came to your event, but how you made your treatment decisions, and you had help from your uncle, if I'm remembering correctly?
I happen to have.
Yeah.
Yes.
So will you just talk a little bit about that and how you advocated and he advocated for you?
Yeah, so my story is a very Clinton first term story, so a lot of it's not terribly relevant to today because there was no empathy. We were just pieces of meat. There were no support groups. There was like AOL dial-up and floppy disks roamed the land. That's how that was. But the one story that mattered to today's conversation is that I didn't have autonomy in my decision making. Mm-hmm. And that was completely the fault of the oncologists who didn't see me as a person. Mm-hmm. I'd like to think that's changed a bit, but for context, the whole point is that I was a concert pianist. I did have terminal brain cancer. I did lose the use of my left hand, and I couldn't play anymore. Mm-hmm. One might assume that I'd like to have that back if I lived, right? Yeah. I say one might assume, famous last words. It turns out that after my surgery and after my radiation, which was just Turkish gulag prison horror back then, I had a conversation about let's do chemotherapy. And like, I don't know what that word meant. What do you know? Yeah. Whatever. Okay. What is that? There's more than one, right? I said, when am I going to die? And they said, we're going to give you a 50% chance to live for 5 years. That's great. I'll be 27 and dead.
Yeah.
And well, with the chemo, what does that boost me up to? Like 80, 90, like 55%. I was so happy about this. And I said, fine, what's the over under? And they said, well, come back to us and tell us. That is when my Uncle Jay, Dr. Jay Tishfield, one of the world's most renowned 50-year historically like lauded geneticists of the planet, again, happens to be my dad's best friend from Hebrew school in the 1950s, stepped in, asked them, what are you going to do to my godson? They told him, and here's the part that matters, the chemo they wanted to give me, again, there was more than one. One of them would have made me permanently deaf at the dose they wanted to give me. And one of them would have permanently damaged my ability to play because it would give me something called neuropathy in my fingers and toes. One might assume that the concert pianist, if he lived, would want to be a concert pianist again. Thereby, ergo, heretofore, you do not want chemo that ruins your hearing in your fingers.
Yeah.
So I found that out from Uncle Jay. I went back to the oncologist and I said, what the hell's wrong with you? Why wouldn't you tell me these things? No chemo. And they got really pissed at me for not listening and heeding the words of God. Yeah. So I'm glad I didn't do that.
Yeah.
You know, how do you make a decision between, do I want to live for 5 years without this and play in here, or potentially live for 80 years with the chemo and not have it? Mm-hmm. What kind of decision is that for a 22-year-old to make?
It's unimaginable, really.
So that is the core takeaway. Again, this book is not a memoir, but that chunk of my story matters to the larger narrative.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I like I mentioned, you've been an advocate for yourself. You've been an advocate for...
Well, I didn't know to be an advocate for myself.
You had to be.
Yeah.
You had to learn
We had to figure it out on the fly.
Yeah.
And that's not acceptable.
No. So I'm curious now how you... obviously, this focuses on the payer and how the American healthcare system is really just turned around upside down in so many different ways. But you do talk about the payer and how things have to change with payers in order to get broader system reform. How did you decide to go that route? How did you decide to like make that sort of the angle of this book?
Well, I like to talk about how things were differently terrible 30 years ago, and they're much differently terrible today.
Yeah.
So the fact that we still, at least for now, as this recording, ACA is still kind of roughly cobbled together. They haven't killed it entirely. Getting to that point, looking at what it took to take like this moral imperative to convince our elected officials to do anything right for their voters against the backdrop of big money. I think Citizens United needs to be just thrown into the wood chipper at this point. I don't know how that's going to be fixed in any way, shape, or form. But between that and the HMO Act and all the other little nitty-bitty things that get built into pork and the bullshit stuff have eroded basically the human right. And I say right, liberty, freedom, access, whatever it is, to not die when you get sick because you don't choose to be there, right? And this isn't a Bernie Sanders healthcare for all. That's not what this is. What I really got sort of disenchanted with after the pandemic, after I stepped down, just observing these things from the crazy crow's nest, is that these begging Hill Day moments don't really matter anymore. And yet they happen all the time. And even just today, I put up a scathing post on LinkedIn, not really attacking the American Cancer Society Cancer Action. They're important. They do great work. But my friend Jeff was doing something today for like esophageal cancer, and they're all determined by the system. Now, Like, hey, guys, we're showing up on this day to say this to these people. That's not how we want to operate. Mm-hmm. We want to show up when we want to say this to these people. Mm-hmm. So I think I talk about advocacy 1.0 in the book, that up until now, it's kind of sort of done its job. But what is advocacy 2.0, which is organizing as a voter bloc, as a union? What would happen if even just the 19 million cancer survivors above voting age organized as a voter bloc? You don't need 19 million people. You need 100,000 people to agree to something, and then you have a voter bloc. What would that mean? Because I think in the book, I talk about the movie Bug's Life and how the ants all soon realize that there's more of them than there are of the grasshoppers. Yeah. And it's not apples to apples because there's money versus people, but we've never had civic power. And those are two really important words, because that's kind of what Larry Kramer did with ACT UP. We didn't really force policy. We shamed through civic power. And then finally realized you're not going to get elected unless you stop people from dying of AIDS. What a nice idea to have voters, right? That was what it came down to. We're losing voters. So let's just do the right thing, sort of wink, wink, so we have voters, right? What is the version of that in oncology? Is it just better to let us die, or is it better to fight the fact that insurance is now the final cut of whether you do get what you want or whether you're just left to your own druthers?
Yeah, absolutely. How do we rev up sort of an initiative, and mobilizing a young voter bloc is hard. It's hard historically. Everyone's trying to do it well. But from what I've read in here and whatnot, I mean, you have some really great ideas and some inspiring and optimistic takes in addition, like amid, just how backwards everything is. And so,
so voter blocs are interesting because like lobby groups and PACs have agendas. Voter blocs have like single issue sentiments. And I'm pretty sure I've done my own version of canvassing, and not really straw polling, but whatever that language is for someone like me when I travel. And I basically, I've gone to red states and purple states and blue states and colleges. And I ask a basic question. It's like, should insurance be your doctor? And everyone says no. Yeah. I don't care who you voted for.
Yeah.
You didn't vote for that.
Yeah.
Should middlemen get in the way of your conversation with your doctor, and should your doctor kill themselves and leave practice because of that? No, we don't want that either. I didn't vote for that.
No.
Should you be given a little bit of a helping hand when you enter the shit happens store that you don't want to be in? Meaning, can you help by navigating me? Can someone be like a public defender and protect me from this? When 80% of denials are appealed or overturned, but when 0.02% of denials are actually appealed, how do we get that number up? Because people are just given up. 100%. Nothing's 100%.
Yeah.
But that's really what this is. No one wants this. Like, the approval rating of health insurance is lower than Congress. So that's what I mean by I can go to a college campus and maybe there's nothing wrong with you, which is great. We want you to be happy and healthy. But sure enough, your aunt, your mom, your sister, whatever the hell it is, someone's been screwed by health insurance. I'm working now with a women's health advocate group that's doing endometriosis advocacy. It's a whole different vertical, but there's all sorts of crazy chicanery happening there too.
Yeah.
So this is universal.
It is universal. I would agree. And everyone's touched the system in some way or another. All right. Well, we should probably wrap there. Matthew Zachary's We the Patients is out. It's a great read. I would recommend it myself. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll hopefully have you back soon.
Wherever books are sold.
Yeah, wherever books are sold. Thanks.
Thank you.
Madden and Lesha, I'm excited for the trends section today of the podcast, where we'll talk a little bit about some things that happened over the weekend as it relates to all of the sort of health news wrapped into one that's going on in the U.S. right now. RFK Jr. went on CNN and had a pretty contentious interview with Dana Bash about everything from the origins of COVID to measles, and obviously vaccines were touched on in that conversation. Like I mentioned, it was pretty contentious. Madden, can you take us through a little bit of what he said?
Where to even start? I mean, the scariest thing about this is that this guy is the Secretary of Health. And he went on Dana Bash's show and as the Secretary of Health talked more about constitutional rights than he did about anything having to do with health. Public health should not necessarily intersect with discussions about constitutional rights.
We need to protect our constitutional rights. That is the primary obligation.
What does that mean?
Well, during COVID, we completely dismantled our constitutional rights. We began censoring people in violation of the First Amendment.
But you're saying what not to do. I'm asking what to do. But I want to talk about.
That's something to do. That is the number one priority. We protect the Constitution. The Constitution was written.
Forgive me, but you're talking about rights, and I'm asking about a potential public health crisis.
That is he's coming. Using this platform to just reinforce so many false narratives. And when I say false narratives, what I really mean is lies. RFK Jr. went on this program and said that the single largest, the leading cause of death for children in the United States is RSV. The leading cause of death for children in the United States ages 1 to 18 is gunshot wounds. Plain and simple. It is not RSV. It doesn't fit the narrative that Kennedy and his cohorts are trying to press. And it's absolutely terrifying to me. I mean, I used to joke that, I think these people are trying to kill us. And now I'm convinced of it. It's not a joke. This wanton ignorance is truly terrifying for the population of the United States, full stop. And not just the United States, the world, because the United States had been the leader in scientific research and medical research. And that's not the case anymore. And it puts the entire global population at peril. Sounds dramatic. Maybe I am being dramatic, but it's true.
All clips credit to State of the Union on CNN. Yeah, I thought it was interesting. Dana sort of pointed out or was talking about the U.S. response to the measles outbreak specifically. And RFK Jr. was quick to point out that, Canada and Mexico and England, there are these countries that have more measles cases than the U.S. And she quickly jumped in and said, but you are the most famous, well-known voice in the globe, that, when it comes to sharing your opinions and vaccine skepticism. So do you think that you're not at least a little bit accountable for, for outbreaks happening abroad? Lesha, I'd love to ask you a little bit. That interview and sort of the news that we've been seeing out of the HHS for the last couple of years, frankly, has made me think a lot about institutional distrust. And that's something that we normally think about with pharma. Pharma has obviously faced a lot of institutional distrust, but it's interesting to see it coming or directed sort of towards the federal government and actions around public health. I'm wondering if you can think a little or talk to me a little bit about whether pharma might have a role here, whether it's promoting sort of public health messaging or sort of just doing awareness campaigns to sort of fill like a trust vacuum that might be left by like the HHS.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that pharma marketers have been grappling with, really since COVID. Like there has been a drop in trust in pharma and medical institutions, as you mentioned, and also governmental agencies and public health agencies. And with that conversation, that RFK Jr. had on the show, it became clear that like a lot of that skepticism still remains. But it was interesting because it felt like he was kind of referring to medical institutions, the pharma industry, and media, like journalists, as this one unified front of lies. So he wasn't even like necessarily pointing to one of them, but saying all of you were parroting lies. And it was interesting that he kind of like put them all together in a unified front. And, I was reading some of the comments on the YouTube video of that clip, and one of them was, the pharma-owned media is the problem. And, the media was a part of the problem. And, all these comments are of people in America who really believe this. So when it comes to like what pharma marketers can do about this, I think there are a few things. A lot of it comes down to helping people truly understand how clinical trials are run and being super transparent about data. And I mean, that's going to also require like the American public to learn about clinical trial design and learn like what limitations are, what demographic inclusions are, what real world evidence is. And it seems like RFK Jr. is kind of not really getting into the details of why he believes these studies are wrong, but it's important to be super, super clear and transparent about how clinical trials are run, because that's really the data, that's the science, that's like what people need to believe in. I also think instead of maybe relying on traditional experts to spread messaging, there's so many influencers now. There's so many kind of like patient influencers and more local influencers or local leaders that people tend to maybe trust more than these sort of far away experts like Dr. Fauci and stuff like that. And I think like if pharma marketers maybe lean more into spreading their messaging through these patient influencers or other influencers and digital channels, I think there might be ways to kind of break through some of the skepticism a little more. But those were a couple of my thoughts. I'm curious if either of you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure that, well, I'm not going to say I disagree with you. I'm not sure I like what you're saying though. Using influencers, we know is can be a very effective strategy, but who are the influencers? I think for me, it's a more existential question, and it's like, who's telling the truth here? And what do they have to gain by telling this truth? And I don't mean their truth, right? I mean the truth. I mean, science provides us with truth. It's just right now that we live in a post-truth society where if the truth doesn't fit someone's worldview or narrative, they just say it's not true. I choose not to believe it. One of the points that Bash was trying to make was that, look, the COVID vaccine works. It prevented deaths. And he's saying, no, it didn't. It did. I mean, more than 1 million people died. But it's harder to say, here's how many lives we think were saved by use of the vaccine. So, I guess what I would urge pharma companies to do is to just, as you said, Lesha, be utterly transparent, but stick to the facts and don't try to spoon feed people medicine that they don't want to take, but rather say, here's the benefit, both for you and for your family, and to try and get away from this, like, it's my constitutional right not to take it. It's like, it's true. You don't have to take it if you don't want to, but don't spread lies about why you're not taking it.
Yeah. I almost wonder if, we just lack like a fundamental sort of incentive structure or sort of financial basis for having like health influencers that, we've seen like some big drug makers do campaigns around like prostate cancer awareness and things like that. That's not benefiting necessarily the bottom line of one product or another. Of course, like creating positive brand awareness, but it's more sort of educational in nature. I'm wondering if do we even have the capacity or the network to pay influencers to do some of that sort of education around how real world evidence works, how trials are conducted. That seems to me like a place where pharma companies could step in. I know Jack and I have thought about this a lot. Pfizer does a really good job of taking people, I don't know, probably like a social media producer into their labs and saying here's the hood. I don't know the terminology, but that I'm working under today. And here, and so I think sort of pulling back the curtain and maybe that requires bringing in outside influencers. Maybe it doesn't, but, sort of just taking a moment to almost have like a PBS sort of role in how Americans understand science seems like it would be, it would sort of chip away at this problem to me.
Yes and no. I think the thought comes from a really smart place, right? Incentive. How do you incentivize people? But if you're a denier, it's going to make it makes your job as a denier easier to say, like, see, they're being paid by the pharma companies to tell you this. And it's just what it goes back to. The root of it is just a fundamental distrust of the pharma industry. And that stems from the fact, I sound like a broken record, but pharma doesn't do a good enough job of telling its story and touting the benefits that it brings to society.
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear from, our audience of marketers and agencies, whether they feel like they're more in the defensive position or the offensive position when it comes to communicating science, especially science around things like vaccines right now. I know there were some campaigns by pharma and bio to sort of just like harp on how important it is to continue investing in science. But from the companies themselves, if they're feeling like they're in a little bit of on the back heel a little bit. Great. Well, Matt and Lesha, anything else you guys want to add before we sign off on this incredibly optimistic, forward-thinking discussion?
I would urge people to watch the video of the interview if they haven't, because RFK's body posture is body language is really interesting. A lot of crossed arms across the chest, which I thought was interesting. I was like, wow, what's that all about? Maybe he doesn't really believe what he's saying. But I also can't believe that he would. Actually, I can believe it. It's just a really sad state of affairs when a person in that position would use that platform to basically pick a fight with a journalist who's supposed to ask hard questions.
Yeah. I'll end this by asking if either of you feel like you are bought by Big Pharma. Are you the Big Pharma media, paid media? I get no checks from Big Pharma. I don't know about you guys.
I get no checks, period, from Big Pharma. But I've seen the benefit that Big Pharma has brought to my life and the life of my family, the extended life of my family. And I just wish it would do a better job of telling that.
Absolutely. All right, Madden and Lesha, thank you so much for this discussion. I'm sure we'll talk a lot more in the coming weeks and months and years about how pharma can get out there and tell its story a little bit better, but appreciate it.
Thanks, Bella.
Thanks, Bella.
The MM+M Podcast is produced by Jack O'Brien, Lesha Bushak, Steve Madden, Jamison Fleming, Bella Chakowski, Bill Fitzpatrick, and Gordon Failer, with additional production by Lola Offenbach and Julia Ramada. Listen, follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts.
Campaign chemistry.
The very best of outdoor advertising is when you see it, you go,
A weekly podcast from Campaign US, featuring conversations with creatives and marketers leading the industry.
Mike Peck is the Vice President of Creative at Brooks Running.
Xanthi Wells, VP of Global Creative at Pinterest.
Hi, Megan Lally here from High Dive.
Today, I was able to grab Aaron Starkman, Global CCO of Rethink.
Listen, follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. And for the latest news in our industry, visit campaignlive.com.